The warning lights turned red across every screen in the palace. Queen Valira stood at the tall window of her throne room, watching the sky burn. Far above her world, beyond the clouds, her defense stations were dying one by one. "Your Majesty," said Advisor Thesson, his old voice shaking, "the outer stations have fallen. The Corvin fleet has broken through." Valira did not turn around. She was young for a queen, only 30 cycles old, but today she felt ancient. Her wings, pale blue and delicate like all Ethan, hung low against her back. She had not slept in 3 days. "How many ships?" she asked. 200 warships, Your Majesty. Perhaps more." 200. Against her 15 remaining defense stations. Against her people who had not fought a real war in 4 generations. The Ethan were builders and healers, artists and diplomats. They made beautiful things. They did not make weapons. And now the Corvin had come to take everything. She finally turned to face her council. 12 advisors sat around the ancient table, their faces full of fear. Thessan stood closest to her, his gray wings folded tight. He had served her grandmother, then her mother, and now her. He had never looked so old. "The Corvin commander has sent terms," said General Oris. He was the youngest general in Ethan history, but that meant little. Their military was ceremonial, pretty uniforms and parade marches. "He demands complete surrender. All resources, all technology, all population." "Slavery," whispered Counselor Mira. "He means slavery." "He means death," corrected Thesson. "The Corvin do not keep slaves, they keep workers. When the workers break, they throw them away." Valira closed her eyes. She thought of her people in the cities below. Millions of Ethan going about their lives, trusting their queen to protect them. Children learning to fly for the first time. Artists painting the sunset. Healers tending the sick. All of them looking up at the sky, wondering if tomorrow would come. "We could surrender," said Counselor Bren. His voice was quiet, ashamed. "If we give them what they want, perhaps they will be merciful. Perhaps some of us will survive." "There is no mercy in the Corvin heart," said Thessan. "I am old enough to remember the Tellus massacre. 10 million souls. Gone in one night. And the Tellus had surrendered." Silence fell over the council room. Valira walked slowly to the window again. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. It was beautiful. Her world was beautiful, and soon it would burn. "There must be something," she said softly. "Someone who can help us." "Your Majesty, we sent distress calls to every allied system," said General Oris. "The Falani say they cannot spare ships. The Brock are too far away. The Mithrani have closed their borders. No one is coming." "No one wants to fight the Corvin," added Counselor Mira bitterly. "They are too afraid." Valira pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. She remembered sitting in this same room as a child, listening to her grandmother tell stories. The old queen had lived through interesting times, times when the galaxy was different. One story came back to her now, a story about a strange species from a distant arm of the galaxy. Small creatures with no claws, no fangs, no armor, soft skin and blunt teeth. They looked like prey, but they were not prey. "Grandmother used to tell me about the humans," Valira said quietly. The room went still. "Your Majesty," said Thesson carefully, "the humans have not been seen in this sector for 80 years. After the expansion wars, they retreated to their own space. They became traders and merchants. They are not warriors anymore." "But they were once," said Valira. "Grandmother said they were the most frightening species she ever encountered, not because they were cruel, because they never ever gave up." "Old stories," said General Oris. "The humans are gone." "Are they?" Valira turned to face him. Grandmother kept a frequency, a single communication channel given to her by a human captain long ago. She said it was for desperate times. She said if the Ethan ever truly needed help, we should call that frequency. And what? Hope that humans answer? General Oris shook his head. Your Majesty, with respect, we need real solutions, not fairy tales. What real solutions do you have, General? Valira's voice was sharp now. Your ceremonial soldiers? Your parade ships? We have nothing. We are surrounded by 200 warships, and we have nothing. No one spoke. Valira walked to the ancient communication panel on the far wall. It was old technology, older than she was, but it still worked. Her grandmother had made sure of that. Leave me, she said. Your Majesty, Thesson began. Leave me, all of you. I need to think. One by one, the council members filed out. Thesson was the last to go. He paused at the door and looked back at his queen. She looked so small standing there, so young, carrying the weight of millions of lives. Your grandmother was the wisest queen I ever served, he said softly. She did not keep that frequency for nothing. Then he was gone. Valira stood alone in the throne room. Through the window she could see the first Corvan ships entering the upper atmosphere. Troop carriers. They were preparing to invade. She had hours, maybe less. Her hand trembled as she activated the old communication panel. The frequency was still saved, exactly where her grandmother had left it. A simple string of numbers, labeled with 2 words in an alien language she could not read. She pressed the transmit button. This is Queen Valira of the Ethan Empire, she said, her voice barely steady. I am sending this message on a frequency given to my grandmother many years ago. I do not know if anyone is listening. I do not know if anyone will come. She paused, struggling to find the words. My world is surrounded. My people are going to die. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight, but we know how to hope. She took a deep breath. If there are any humans listening to this frequency, please, please help us. We have no one else to ask. She ended the transmission and stepped back. The room was silent. The sky grew darker. The Corvan ships descended like hungry birds. Queen Valira sank into her grandmother's throne and waited. She did not know that her message was already racing across the stars, bouncing through relay stations older than most civilizations. She did not know that in a distant corner of space, a small cargo ship called the Starlight Dawn was picking up her words. She did not know that 4 humans were about to change everything. All she knew was the darkness outside her window and the tiny, fragile hope burning in her chest. Someone would come. They had to. The Starlight Dawn was not a pretty ship. She was old and patched in a dozen places, her hull scarred from years of hauling cargo through rough space. But she flew true, and that was all that mattered to Captain Una Park. Una sat in the pilot's chair, her feet up on the console, reading a book on her tablet. They were 3 days out from their last delivery, cruising through empty space on their way home. It was quiet. It was peaceful. She liked peaceful. Captain. The voice came from behind her. Minho Lee, her engineer, stood in the doorway. He was a thin man with tired eyes and clever hands. He could fix anything. We're picking up something strange on the long-range receiver. Una lowered her tablet. Strange how? Old frequency. Really old. I didn't even know we could receive signals on that band. Minho walked to the communication console and tapped a few buttons. It's a distress call, alien language, but the translator is working on it. A moment later, a voice filled the small bridge. It was soft and afraid, speaking in halting universal standard. A queen begging for help, a world surrounded, a people about to die. Una listened without moving. When the message ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. Play it again, she said. Minho played it again. Una stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars were cold and distant. Somewhere out there, a young queen was watching her world burn. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it's real," said Minho. "The encryption on that frequency is ancient, military grade, but from a long time ago. Someone gave it to them as the emergency line." Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Tae Kim appeared, his broad frame filling the doorway. He was the ship's security chief, a former military sergeant who had left the service 10 years ago. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "I heard it," he said. "The Ethan. I remember them from old intelligence files. Peaceful species, never caused any trouble. Good people." "And now the Corvin are killing them," said Yuna. "The Corvin!" Tae's jaw tightened. "Bad news. Very bad news. They're conquerors. They take what they want and destroy what they don't need." Dr. Hana Choi came in last. She was the ship's medic, a small woman with gentle hands and kind eyes. She had heard the message, too. Her face was pale. "That poor woman," Hana said softly. "She sounds so scared." The four of them stood in the small bridge, looking at each other. They all knew what they were thinking. They all knew it was crazy. Yuna spoke first. "Minho, how far away is Etheria?" 3 days at maximum speed, maybe 2.5 if I push the engines hard." "And the Corvin fleet?" 200 warships, according to the message." Tae laughed, but there was no humor in it. "4 of us against 200 warships. Those are bad odds, Captain." "I know. We're merchants," Minho added. "We haul cargo. We don't fight wars." "I know." Hana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She asked for help. She said please." Everyone looked at her. "I became a doctor because I wanted to help people," Hana continued. "I can't hear someone say please like that and do nothing. I can't." "Hana's right," said Yuna. "I've been flying ships for 20 years. I've seen a lot of bad things happen in this galaxy. Mostly I looked the other way because it wasn't my problem." She paused. "I'm tired of looking the other way." Tae crossed his arms. "So what's the plan? We fly in, wave at 200 warships, and ask them nicely to leave?" "I don't know the plan yet," Yuna admitted. "But I know we have to go. We're the only ones who heard her. If we don't go, no one will." "We could die," said Minho quietly. "We could," Yuna agreed. "But those people will definitely die if we do nothing. Millions of them. Children, families. All gone because nobody answered when they called for help." The ship hummed around them, engines running steady. The stars waited outside. Tae was silent for a long time. Then he uncrossed his arms and sighed. "I always knew retirement was boring. Guess I had one more fight left in me." Minho shook his head, smiling despite himself. "You're all crazy, but I'm not letting you fly my ship into a war zone without me. Someone has to keep the engines running." Hana simply nodded. "I'm in. Someone will need a doctor." Yuna felt something warm spread through her chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. She looked at her crew, her family, and she smiled. "Then let's go save a planet." Minho rushed to the engine room. Moments later, the ship shuddered as the engines kicked into high power. The stars outside blurred as they jumped to maximum speed. Yuna sat back in the pilot's chair and opened the communication channel. She recorded a simple message, short and clear. "This is Captain Yuna Park of Earth vessel Starlight Dawn. We received your distress call. We are coming. Hold on." She sent it on the same frequency. Across the vast darkness of space, the message flew toward Etheria. It passed dead stars and empty worlds, through clouds of dust older than time. It flew for hours until finally it reached a small blue planet surrounded by enemy ships. In the royal palace, Queen Valira had fallen asleep in her grandmother's throne. She woke to the sound of beeping from the old communication panel. A message had arrived. She stumbled to the console and played it. A human voice, steady, and calm. "We received your distress call. We are coming. Hold on." Valira played it again. And again. Tears rolled down her face. She fell to her knees before the console, her wings trembling. They heard her. Someone heard her. Tessin found her there an hour later, still kneeling, still crying. She looked up at him with eyes full of wonder. "They're coming," she whispered. "The humans are coming." Tessin helped her to her feet. His old hands were gentle. "How many ships?" "I don't know. The message didn't say." "It doesn't matter," said Tessin. He was smiling now, really smiling, for the first time in days. "Your grandmother always said the same thing about humans. If they say they're coming, they will come. And when humans come to help, they bring more than ships." "What do they bring?" Tessin looked out the window at the Corvin fleet filling the sky. "Hope," he said. "They bring hope." Outside, the enemy prepared for invasion. Their warships darkened the heavens like storm clouds. Their soldiers checked their weapons and waited for the order to attack. None of them knew that a small cargo ship was racing toward them through the darkness. None of them knew that everything was about to change. High Commander Drath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator. He was tall even for a Corvin, his scales dark green and thick as armor. Scars covered his face from 100 battles. He had conquered 12 worlds in his lifetime. Etheria would be his 13th. "Report," he said, his voice deep like rolling thunder. "The defense stations are destroyed, Commander," said his tactical officer. "The planet is surrounded. Ground forces are ready to deploy. Victory is certain." Drath nodded slowly. Everything was going according to plan. The Ethan had no real military. Their ships were toys. Their soldiers were decorations. This would be an easy conquest. Then why did he feel uneasy? "Commander," another officer approached, looking confused. "We've intercepted a strange transmission. A human ship is approaching the system." The bridge went quiet. "Human," said Prince Varric, stepping forward. He was Drath's son, young and hungry for glory. His scales were bright and unmarked. He had never lost a battle because he had never faced a real enemy. "What would humans be doing here?" "Unknown, my prince. It appears to be a small cargo vessel. 4 life signs aboard." Varric laughed. 4 humans on a cargo ship? Is this a joke? Should we be worried about their vegetables attacking us? The officers around him laughed too. Drath did not laugh. "Father," Varric noticed his silence. "Surely you're not concerned about 4 humans." Drath turned to the window, staring out at the stars. He was remembering something, an old story from his childhood told by his grandfather on cold nights. "When I was young," Drath said slowly, "my grandfather told me about the human expansion wars. He served in them. He was one of 6,000 soldiers sent to take a human colony world." Varric shrugged. "And? We obviously won. We're still here." "He was one of 40 who survived." The laughter died. Drath turned to face his son. "The humans looked weak. Small bodies, no claws, no natural weapons. Our generals thought it would take 3 days to conquer them. It took 3 years, and in the end, we didn't conquer them. We agreed to a peace treaty because we couldn't afford to keep fighting." "That was centuries ago," said Varric, his voice less certain now. "The humans are different now. They're traders, merchants. They stopped being warriors." "Did they?" Drath walked closer to his son. "Or did they just choose to stop? There is a difference, boy, between someone who cannot fight and someone who chooses not to. The second kind is far more dangerous." "It's 4 people, father, on a cargo ship. And my grandfather faced 400 humans on that colony world. 400 against 6,000. They shouldn't have lasted a week." Drath's eyes were hard. "Do you know what the humans did? They dug tunnels. They set traps. They attacked at night and vanished before dawn. When we destroyed their weapons, they made new ones from scraps. When we cut off their supplies, they ate things that would poison any other species. They never stopped. They never surrendered. They just kept fighting until we were the ones who wanted to stop. The bridge was silent. The galaxy has forgotten. Drath continued. The younger species never saw what humans can do. They see merchants and traders, harmless creatures with soft skin. But I remember my grandfather's stories. The fear in his eyes when he told them. He said humans are not like other species. When they fight for something they believe in, they become something else. Something that does not stop. Something that does not know how to quit. Prince Varric swallowed hard. So what do we do? Reinforce the blockade. Double the patrols around the jump points, and do not underestimate them. Drath turned back to the window. 4 humans on a cargo ship should not worry me, but it does. It worries me very much. Far below, on Etheria Prime, Queen Valira was telling Thesson about the human message. The old advisor sat across from her in her private chamber, listening carefully. They didn't say how many ships, Valira said, just that they're coming. Then they may be a small force, said Thesson. Perhaps just the one ship. 1 ship against 200? Yes. Thesson smiled gently. And you think that means they won't come? Valira didn't understand. It would be suicide. Let me tell you a story, said Thesson. When your grandmother was young, before she was queen, our world faced another threat. Raiders from the outer systems. Smaller than the Corvin, but still dangerous. Our defenses were weak. Defeat seemed certain. I never heard this story. It's not one we tell often. It reminds us of our shame. Thesson paused. A human freighter was passing through our system when the raiders attacked. Just 1 ship with a crew of 12. They could have run. They could have jumped away and left us to our fate. No one would have blamed them. What did they do? They turned around and fought. 12 humans against 50 raider ships. They were outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched in every way, but they fought for 6 hours, drawing the raiders' attention while our people evacuated the cities. Valira leaned forward. Did they survive? Some of them. 7 died defending strangers they had never met. Thesson's eyes were distant, lost in memory. After the battle, your grandmother asked the human captain why. Why risk everything for people he didn't know? Do you know what he said? What? He said, because you needed help. That was all. Nothing more complicated than that. You needed help, so they helped. It's just what humans do. Valira sat back in her chair, thinking about this. It seemed impossible. No species was that selfless. No species would sacrifice themselves for strangers without expecting something in return. They're different, said Thesson, reading her expression. Humans are strange and impossible and completely different from everyone else in the galaxy. That's why the Corvin fear them. That's why the old species still whisper stories about them. And that's why, when a human says they're coming to help, you believe them. The door opened. General Oris rushed in, his face pale. Your Majesty, the Corvin have begun landing troops. Ground forces are approaching the capital. Valira stood up. Through the window, she could see dropships descending through the clouds, dark shapes against the sunset. Hundreds of them, carrying thousands of soldiers. How long until they reach the palace? Hours, maybe less. Thesson stood beside her. The humans will come. They might not arrive in time. Then we hold. We hold until they arrive. Thesson put a hand on her shoulder. Your grandmother held for 6 hours. We can do the same. Valira looked at the Corvin ships filling her sky. She was afraid. She was so afraid. But somewhere deep inside her, a small flame of hope refused to die. The humans were coming. She just had to hold on. At the edge of the Etheria system, space twisted and bent. A small cargo ship dropped out of hyperspace, its engines glowing hot from the hard journey. On the bridge, Captain Una Park looked at the screen showing 200 Corvin warships. "Well," she said calmly, "this is going to be interesting." Tay stepped up beside her. "Orders, Captain?" Una smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Let's remind the galaxy why they used to be afraid of us." The Starlight Dawn drifted into the Etheria system like a leaf floating into a hurricane. Around her, 200 Corvin warships filled the darkness. Their weapons were armed, their shields were raised. They were ready for war. They were not ready for this. Captain Una opened a communication channel. Her voice was calm and steady, broadcast on all frequencies for everyone to hear. "Attention, Corvin Fleet. This is Captain Una Park of the Earth vessel Starlight Dawn. The planet below is under human protection. You will withdraw immediately. This is your only warning." For a moment, nothing happened. The message hung in the silence of space. Then the laughter started. On the bridge of the Devastator, Prince Varek was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Human protection? One ship? Oh, this is wonderful. Father, please let me handle this. I want to see the look on their faces when I blow them apart. High Commander Drath did not laugh. His eyes were fixed on the small cargo ship on his screen. "Be careful." "Be careful?" Varek was still smiling. "Of what? It's a cargo ship. It probably doesn't even have weapons." "Then take a full squadron. 10 fighters, no mistakes." Varek wanted to argue, but something in his father's voice stopped him. He nodded and left the bridge. Minutes later, 10 Corvin fighters launched from the fleet and raced toward the Starlight Dawn. They were sleek and fast, built for killing. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small station. On the human ship, Tay watched them coming. 10 fighters incoming. Fast attack configuration. "I see them," said Una. She was still calm. Her hands rested lightly on the flight controls. "Minho, how are the modifications?" From the engine room, Minho's voice crackled over the speaker. "The shields are holding. The cargo launchers are ready. We won't win a straight fight, but we can make them work for it." "That's all I need." Una turned to Ty. "Remember what we talked about?" Tay smiled grimly. "Fight dirty. Don't play fair. Make them regret being born." "Exactly." The Corvin fighters spread out, surrounding the Starlight Dawn in a classic attack pattern. Varek's voice came over the communication channel, arrogant and mocking. "Human vessel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you surrender now, I might let you live long enough to watch your precious Ethan friends die." Una didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the engines to full power and flew straight at the nearest fighter. The Corvin pilot panicked. He expected the human to run or surrender, not attack. He fired too early, his shots going wide. The Starlight Dawn rolled past him, so close their hulls almost touched. As she passed, Una hit the cargo launcher. 3 large cargo containers flew out of the ship's hold, spinning wildly. They weren't weapons. They were just containers, full of machine parts and spare equipment. But they were heavy, and they were moving fast. One container hit the Corvin fighter's wing, sending it spinning out of control. Another container clipped a second fighter's engine. The third container exploded against a third fighter's cockpit, blinding the pilot. "What are they doing?" shouted Varek over the comm. "Those aren't weapons." "Everything is a weapon," Una replied quietly, "if you know how to use it." She flew the Starlight Dawn into an asteroid field at the edge of the system. The cargo ship was slow compared to the fighters, but it was tough. Mining ships had to survive impacts and collisions. The Starlight Dawn had been bouncing off rocks for 20 years. The Corvin fighters followed her in. It was a mistake. Una knew asteroids. She had flown cargo runs through fields like this 100 times. She knew how they moved, how they spun, where the gaps were, and where the traps waited. The Corvin didn't know any of this. The first fighter tried to follow too closely and scraped against a spinning rock. His shields held, but his speed dropped. Tay fired a precise shot from the Starlight Dawn's small defense cannon, hitting the fighter's damaged section. The ship exploded. "One down," said Tay. "9 to go," said Yuna. She spun the ship around a massive asteroid, using its gravity to slingshot toward 2 more fighters. They scattered, but she was faster than they expected. She wasn't trying to destroy them. She was hurting them. Another cargo container launched, this one trailing a net of emergency cables. It wrapped around a fighter's engines and tangled them. The fighter drifted helplessly, unable to move. "Disable, not destroy," Yuna muttered. "We're not killers. We're just better at surviving." Varek was screaming orders, but his squadron was falling apart. The humans weren't fighting like normal enemies. They used tricks and traps and unexpected moves. They threw rocks and cargo and debris. They flew through gaps that should have been impossible, and they never stopped moving. Every time the Corvin thought they had the human ship cornered, it would spin away and reappear somewhere else. 20 minutes later, 3 Corvin fighters were destroyed, 2 were disabled, and the remaining 5 were scattered and confused. The Starlight Dawn floated in the middle of the asteroid field, barely scratched. Varek's voice shook with rage. "This is impossible." "You're 4 people on a cargo ship." Yuna's response was quiet. 4 people who answered a call for help. 4 people who don't know how to quit. You should have listened when I said withdraw. She opened a new channel, broadcasting to the entire Corvin fleet. "That was a warning. The next wave won't be so gentle. High Commander Drath, I know you can hear me. I know you remember what humans can do. We're not leaving, and we're not alone." On the Devastator, Drath watched the battle footage in silence. His son's voice came over the comm, asking for reinforcements, but Drath barely heard him. The humans had taken out half a squadron without killing most of them. They had used cargo containers and asteroids and emergency cables. They had turned weakness into strength and chaos into strategy. It was exactly how his grandfather had described them. "They haven't changed," Drath said softly to himself. "They never change." "Commander?" His tactical officer was waiting for orders. "Should we send more ships?" Drath was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No. Focus on the ground invasion. Take the planet. Take the Queen. Once we have hostages, the humans will have nothing to fight for." He looked at the small cargo ship on his screen one more time. "But watch them. Watch them closely, and pray that she was lying when she said they're not alone." Far across the galaxy, the Starlight Dawn's broadcast was spreading. Every ship, every station, every world with a receiver was hearing Yuna's words. "We're not leaving, and we're not alone." The old species, the ones who remembered humanity, began to stir. Something was changing. The humans had returned. Captain Yuna's broadcast traveled faster than light. It bounced through relay stations and communication networks, spreading across the sector like ripples in water. And everywhere it went, beings stopped what they were doing and listened. On a trading station near the Falani border, an old cat-like merchant named Casa heard the message. She had traded with humans 40 years ago. She remembered their strange customs, their loud laughter, their stubborn kindness. She remembered how they had helped her family when raiders attacked her homeworld. 4 humans against the Corvin, she said to herself. Brave fools. She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she walked to her communication console and called in every favor she was owed. Within an hour, 3 Falani escort ships were changing course toward Etheria. In a mining colony deep in the asteroid fields, a Brock elder named Granite heard the broadcast. The Brock were a silicon-based species, their bodies made of living stone. They moved slowly and thought even slower. But they never forgot. Granite remembered the humans. 200 years ago, when his colony had been trapped by a cave-in, a human mining crew had spent 3 weeks digging them out. The humans had nearly died themselves, working without sleep, refusing to give up even when everyone said it was hopeless. "Humans do not forget their friends," Granite said in his deep, rumbling voice. "We do not forget them either." The Brock heavy cruiser Stoneheart turned toward Etheria. It was slow, but it was powerful. When it arrived, the Corvin would know it. All across the sector, old allies and forgotten friends heard Yuna's words and began to move. The Villani sent 2 patrol ships. The Thessar sent a medical frigate. Even the Mithrani, who had closed their borders and refused to help, sent a single scout vessel to observe. The message spread. The ships gathered. 4 humans on a cargo ship had lit a spark, and now it was becoming a fire. On the starlight dawn, Hana monitored the communication channels with wide eyes. "Captain, we're getting response signals. Ships are coming." "How many?" asked Yuna. "At least 15 confirmed. Maybe more on the way." Hana looked up at her captain with something like wonder. "They're coming because of your broadcast." Yuna leaned back in her chair. She hadn't expected this. She had hoped, but she hadn't expected it. "I just told the truth. We're not leaving and we're not alone." "You reminded them," said Tay. He was checking his weapons for the 10th time, keeping his hands busy while his mind worked. "The galaxy forgot what humans are like. You reminded them." "Reminded them of what?" "That when humans stand up, others follow. We're not the strongest species or the smartest species. But when we pick a side and refuse to move, other beings look at us and think, maybe we should stand too." Minho came onto the bridge, wiping grease from his hands. "Engines are repaired. Shields are at full power. We're ready for whatever comes next." He paused, looking at the tactical display. "What does come next?" Before anyone could answer, a new signal appeared on Hana's console. It was from Etheria, from the palace. "Put it through," said Yuna. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge. Queen Valera appeared, her image ghostly and blue. She looked tired and scared, but she was standing straight. "Captain Park," she said. "I am Queen Valera. I wanted to thank you. What you did against those fighters. I watched it from the palace. It was incredible." Yuna stood and faced the hologram. 2 women, from different species, different worlds, different lives. But in that moment, they understood each other completely. "We're just getting started, Your Majesty. The Corvin are landing troops. They're marching toward the palace. I don't know how long we can hold." "You don't have to hold alone. More ships are coming. Help is on the way." Valera's wings trembled slightly. "Why? Why would you risk everything for people you've never met?" It was the same question every species asked, the question that confused and amazed and terrified the rest of the galaxy. Why did humans do the things they did? Hana stepped forward, her gentle voice carrying across the stars. "Because you asked. That's all. You asked for help and we heard you. We couldn't ignore that." "But you could have died. You still might die." "Yes." Hana smiled softly. "But if we had flown away and left you to suffer alone, we wouldn't be able to live with ourselves. Some things are more important than being safe." Queen Valera was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and tired, but it was real. "My grandmother told me stories about humans," she said. "I thought they were just stories. I thought no species could really be like that." "We're not perfect," said Yuna. "We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. We do terrible things sometimes. But when someone cries for help, something inside us can't look away. It's just how we're made." "Then perhaps," said Valera, "the galaxy needs more beings like you." An alarm blared on the bridge. Tay checked the tactical display. The Corvin are moving. They're sending more ships to intercept the incoming Allied fleet. How long until our allies arrive? 4 hours for the closest ships. 8 hours for the main force. Valira's face fell. The Corvin will reach the palace in 2 hours. Una and her crew exchanged looks. They all knew what had to be done. They had known from the beginning. Then we'll buy you time, said Una. She turned to Minho. Can you land the ship in a palace courtyard? If there's space, yes. Your Majesty, we're coming down. 4 humans isn't much, but it's what we have. We'll help defend the palace until reinforcements arrive. Queen Valira stared at her. You would land on a planet that's being invaded? Fight on the ground against an army? We would, said Una. We will. But why? This time it was Tai who answered. His voice was quiet but firm. Because you need us, and humans don't abandon people who need us. It's not complicated, Your Majesty. It's just who we are. The hologram flickered. Valira wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I will tell my guards to clear a landing space. I will be waiting for you. The communication ended. Una looked at her crew, her family. 4 ordinary humans, about to fly into a war zone to defend a queen they had never met. Any second thoughts? She asked. Hana shook her head. Minho grinned nervously. Tay just checked his weapons one more time. Good, said Una. Let's go save a planet. The Starlight Dawn angled toward Etheria Prime and began its descent. Behind it, the stars watched in silence as something ancient stirred. The humans were going to war, and this time, the galaxy was watching. The Starlight Dawn touched down in the palace courtyard as smoke rose from the distant city. The Corvin had already begun their attack. Explosions echoed across the horizon, and the screams of civilians mixed with the roar of enemy aircraft. Captain Una was the first one out of the ship. She carried a simple rifle, old but reliable. Behind her came Tay with his military weapons, Minho with a bag of tools and explosives, and Hana with her medical kit. 4 humans, against an army. Queen Valira met them at the entrance to the palace. She was surrounded by her royal guards, tall Ethan warriors with ceremonial armor and crystal-tipped spears. They looked impressive, but Una could see the fear in their eyes. These were soldiers who had never seen real combat. Captain Park, said Valira, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, Una replied. Save it for after we survive. She turned to Tai. Assessment? Tay was already scanning the area, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. The palace is defensible. High walls, limited access points, but those ceremonial guards won't hold against Corvin troops. We need to reorganize the defense. Valira hesitated. My guards answer to General Oris. I'm not sure if they'll listen to a human. They'll listen, said Tay. He walked toward the guard captain, his posture confident and calm. You, what's your name? The guard captain looked down at the small human. He was easily twice Tay's height. Captain Relian. Captain Relian, your queen is about to die unless we work together. I've been fighting wars since before you were born. You can listen to me and live, or ignore me and watch your people die. Your choice. Relian stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head in respect. What do you need us to do? Tay smiled grimly. Now, we're talking. Within an hour, the palace defense had transformed. Minho had sealed secondary entrances with welded metal and improvised barriers. He had connected the palace's power system to create electrical traps in key corridors. Security cameras were rerouted to a central monitoring station. Tay organized the guards into teams, positioning them at choke points where they could fight without being overwhelmed. He taught them basic tactics: cover, communication, crossfire. They learned fast. Fear was an excellent teacher. Hana set up a medical station in the throne room, preparing bandages and supplies for the wounded that would come. She also spent time with the civilians who had taken shelter in the palace, calming the children, helping the elderly. Queen Valeera watched all of this with amazement. 4 humans had turned her confused, terrified palace into a fortress. "How do you know how to do this?" she asked Yuna. "Practice," said Yuna. "Humans have been defending things for a long time. Homes, cities, ideas. We're good at surviving when we shouldn't. But you're not soldiers. You're merchants. Today we're whatever we need to be." The first Corvan scouts reached the palace walls at sunset. They were small units, probing the defenses, testing for weakness. Tay's positioned guards drove them back with precise fire. The crystal spears weren't as deadly as Corvan rifles, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to slow the enemy down. "Reinforcements are 3 hours away," Hana reported. "The Allied fleet is engaging Corvan forces in orbit." "Can we hold for 3 hours?" asked Minho. "We'll hold," said Tay. "We don't have a choice." The main assault came with the darkness. Prince Varric led the attack personally. His humiliation in space had made him desperate for victory. He would take this palace. He would capture this queen. He would prove himself to his father and the entire fleet. Thousands of Corvan soldiers poured toward the palace. They had tanks and artillery. They had air support and heavy weapons. Against them stood a handful of palace guards and 4 humans. The battle was chaos. Explosions shook the walls. Minho's traps caught the first wave, electrocuting soldiers and collapsing prepared sections of corridor. But the Corvan kept coming. They climbed over their dead and pushed forward. Tay fought at the main gate, his rifle firing without stopping. When a guard fell beside him, he pulled the injured Ethan to safety and kept shooting. When his rifle overheated, he picked up a fallen enemy weapon and continued. Yuna coordinated the defense from the central hall, directing guards to weak points, calling for support where it was needed. She was everywhere at once, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. Hana worked in the medical station, treating wounds that would have killed most species. An Ethan guard stumbled in with half his wing torn off. She saved him. A civilian child had been caught in an explosion. She saved her too. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Queen Valeera refused to hide. She stood with her guards, a ceremonial blade in her hand, ready to fight for her own palace. She had never held a weapon in anger before. Tonight, she would learn. 2 hours passed. The outer walls fell. The Corvan pushed into the palace itself. Prince Varric led his personal guard toward the throne room. He could smell victory. The queen was close. A few more minutes, and this would all be over. He turned a corner and found Tay waiting for him. The human was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His armor was cracked. His rifle was empty. But he stood in the middle of the corridor, blocking the path to the throne room. And he did not move. "Out of my way, human," said Varric. "You've lost." "Then why are you talking instead of walking?" Tay replied. Varric roared and charged. He was faster than Tay, stronger than Tay, bigger than Tay. His claws could tear through metal. His scales could deflect most weapons. But Tay had something Varric didn't have. He had been fighting his entire life. They clashed in the corridor, Corvan against human. Varric's claws struck again and again, but Tay dodged and weaved, using his smaller size to avoid the killing blows. He couldn't win a fair fight. So he didn't fight fair. A knife appeared in Tay's hand. He slid under Varric's guard and stabbed the gap between his scales. The prince screamed. "Why won't you die?" Varric howled. Tay grinned, blood on his teeth. "Because she asked for help, and humans don't quit just because it hurts." Behind them, the sound of engines filled the air. Ships were landing in the courtyard. Not Corvan ships, Allied ships. The reinforcements had arrived. Varric heard the sounds and realized what they meant. He looked at the wounded human standing between him and the throne room. He looked at the Allied soldiers pouring through the palace gates. He had lost. "This isn't over," Varric snarled, and retreated with his remaining guards. Tay watched him go, then collapsed against the wall. Hana found him there a minute later and started treating his wounds. "You're an idiot," she said, tears in her eyes. "A brave, stubborn idiot." Tay laughed weakly. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." In the throne room, Queen Valera lowered her blade and watched the allied soldiers enter her palace. Falani, Brock, Valani, Thessar. A dozen species come to help. And at the center of it all, 4 humans who had held the line. They had done it. They had survived. The battle in orbit lasted through the night. The Allied fleet grew with every hour as more ships arrived from distant systems. What had started as 4 humans on a cargo ship became 40 vessels from 12 species, all fighting for a world they had no obligation to protect. High Commander Drath watched from the bridge of the Devastator as his fleet crumbled. His sun had failed on the ground, his commanders had failed in space, and everywhere he looked, more Allied ships were appearing, drawn by that single human broadcast. "We're not leaving, and we're not alone." The human had been right. They weren't alone, and now Drath's certain victory had become an uncertain disaster. "Commander," said his tactical officer, "we've lost 40 ships. The blockade is breaking. Ground forces are in retreat. Prince Varek is requesting immediate evacuation." Drath said nothing. He stared at the small cargo ship still floating among the Allied fleet. The starlight dawn. 4 humans. 4 impossible humans who had changed everything. His grandfather had tried to warn him. The galaxy had tried to forget. But the truth was still the truth. Humans never gave up. "Open a channel to the palace," Drath said quietly. "I wish to speak with the Queen." Queen Valera received the communication in her damaged throne room. The walls were scorched, the windows were shattered, bodies were still being carried away. But she stood tall, her wings spread, her eyes fierce. Beside her stood Captain Una Park. The human was exhausted, her uniform torn and bloody, but she was still standing. Somehow, she was always still standing. "High Commander Drath," said Valera, "have you called to surrender?" On the screen, Drath's scarred face was unreadable. "I have called to discuss terms." "Then let me tell you my terms." Valera's voice was steel. "You will withdraw all forces from my system immediately. You will return all territory taken during this invasion. You will pay reparations for the damage you have caused, and you will sign a non-aggression treaty that will bind your empire for the next 100 years. Those are harsh terms. They are merciful terms." Valera stepped forward. "You came to my world with 200 warships. You came to enslave my people and steal my resources. You killed thousands of civilians who had done nothing wrong. I could demand your execution. I could demand the destruction of your fleet. Instead, I am offering you a chance to leave with your lives and your honor." Drath was silent. Una spoke quietly, her voice carrying across the communication channel. "She's giving you a gift, Commander. Take it. The war is over. More killing won't change anything. It will just make more widows and orphans on both sides." "And if I refuse, then we keep fighting." Una met his eyes through the screen. "And I promise you we won't stop. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You know what humans are like when we have something to fight for. Do you really want to test that?" Drath looked at her for a long moment. He remembered his grandfather's stories, the endless war, the impossible humans who refused to die, the peace treaty that had finally ended the bloodshed centuries ago. He remembered the fear. "I accept your terms," he said to Queen Valera. "The Corvin Dominion will withdraw." The communication ended. In the throne room, silence fell. Then slowly, a sound began to build, cheering, crying, laughing. The Ethan guards were celebrating, embracing each other, overwhelmed with relief. Queen Valera turned to Una, Her eyes were shining with tears. "You saved us. 4 humans saved an entire world." "We just lit the spark," said Yuna. "Your people did the rest. The Allied fleet did the rest. You did the rest, standing here with a blade when you could have run." "I learned from watching you." Yuna smiled tiredly. "That's what humans do best. We're not the strongest or the smartest. But when we stand up for something, others notice. And sometimes that's enough." The war was over. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed. The Ethan Empire and Earth established formal diplomatic relations. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. Species that had ignored each other for centuries started talking again. And everywhere, beings told the story of the Etheria crisis. How a dying queen had whispered one word into the darkness. How 4 humans had answered. How the galaxy had remembered what humanity meant. Queen Valera visited Earth 6 months later. She stood in the capital, surrounded by millions of humans, and gave a speech that was broadcast across the known universe. "My people owe their lives to humanity," she said. "Not because humans are powerful or wealthy or numerous, but because when we cried for help, they came. They asked for nothing in return. They risked everything because it was the right thing to do. That is what makes humans special, not their technology or their armies, but their hearts." Captain Yuna watched the speech from the crowd, standing with her crew. Tay had healed, though he would carry scars forever. Minho had already rebuilt the Starlight Dawn twice. Hana had been offered positions at a dozen hospitals and had turned them all down. They were a family now. They always would be. "Think they'll write stories about us?" Minho asked. "Probably," said Yuna. "But we didn't do it for stories." "Then why did we do it?" Yuna thought about it. She thought about the message that had come through the old frequency, the voice of a frightened young queen begging for help from strangers. She thought about the choice they had made, flying toward 200 warships in a battered cargo ship. "Because she asked," Yuna said simply. "That's all. She asked, and we heard her." That night, on a distant Corvin colony world, an old veteran told his grandson a story. The boy had heard many tales of Corvin glory, of conquests and victories. But this story was different. "Tell me about the Etheria War, grandfather," the boy said. The old veteran was quiet for a moment. He had been there. He had seen it all. "We surrounded them," he said slowly. "We had 200 warships. They had nothing. No fleet, no army, no hope. The queen was trapped in her palace, waiting to die. We had every advantage. Victory was certain." "So what happened?" The old veteran looked at the stars through his window. Even now, years later, he could remember the fear that had spread through the fleet when the human ship appeared. Just one small ship against an armada. It should have meant nothing. "The queen spoke one word," he said. "Just one word. And everything changed. Our fleet retreated. Our army was defeated. The entire war fell apart because of one word." The boy leaned forward, curious. "What word, grandfather?" The old veteran closed his eyes. He could still hear his commander's voice, trembling with an emotion that Corvin warriors were never supposed to feel. He could still see the small cargo ship floating alone in the darkness, defiant and unafraid. "Humans," he whispered. "She said, humans. And we lost everything." The boy didn't understand. How could one word have such power? How could one species change the fate of worlds? But someday, he would learn. Someday he would meet a human, and he would see what his grandfather had seen. The quiet courage, the stubborn kindness, the refusal to abandon anyone who asked for help. Someday he would understand why the galaxy had learned to fear that word. Someday he would understand why the galaxy had also learned to hope. Humans. They were coming, and they would never stop.